From the center of the universe, now in its 7th season covering your 19-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast with Argos color analyst Ben Grant and Coach JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name's Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we're here to get you set for Week 7 of the CFL season with your 1-4 Toronto Argonauts traveling to La Belle Province to take on the Montreal Alouettes, who are quite amazingly tied for the division lead with the Hamilton Tiger Cats at 3-2, and Hamilton has the tiebreaker in that one. So, who knows what's happening right now in the East. But here's what is on the docket for today's show. There's a number of transactions this week. The Argos are starting to get a little healthier, but that has also meant some players needed to be released. So we'll go through some of that. And on that topic, we want to talk about how soon is too soon to bring players back from injury. And do teams maybe have to adjust that philosophy when things start to get dire? We'll get into that, and we'll sort of go through how that might impact their decision on when to play Chad Kelly. Plus, we've got our usual topics like Pick 6, the game preview, injury report, OCDC, one thing, put me down for 20, and challenge flag. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, it is so hot in Toronto, it is humid, and there is nothing better than sitting on a patio with an ice cold beer, and you've got so many to choose from when you go to Something in the Water Brewing. You've got award-winning beer that you could choose from. You've got a beer that was made for fans of the Double Blue, for you Toronto Argonauts fans, Longboat Pale Ale. If you haven't tried Longboat Pale Ale, you absolutely have to try it, but there's a lot of other good stuff there too. It doesn't just have to be Longboat Pale Ale. It should be, but you can also try some of their award-winning stuff. Hazy Maitland is still one of my favorites. I think there's so many. You can't really go wrong, and you couldn't be in a better location for Argonauts games, for Argonauts practices. Out at practice today, there was a bunch of us there, and a few of the guys were talking about going to Something in the Water after practice because it is a perfect location, just steps from Lamport Stadium and steps from BMO Field. If you want to head there pre-game and get a few drinks before watching the Argos at your next home game, make sure you check out Something in the Water Brewing. All right, JB, let's get into these transactions. It's sort of like, I don't know, it's mixed emotions, right? Where you have players coming back who have been, in some cases, on the shelf all season long, in some cases out for several weeks. You've had other players come in, step in, and play well in some cases, and when these injured players come back, you got to let guys go. You have to make roster decisions. Are you of the philosophy that you shouldn't lose your job to injury? Or like, how do you approach making decisions like this when you've got someone that gets hurt, someone else comes in, someone comes back? How do you approach, in terms of team building, dealing with injury situations like this?
Well, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule. I think it's professional football. You're not guaranteed anything. I think if you have a player who is a team leader, then you're worried about the chemistry of your group, and I think that you want to make sure that they are plugged back in. But if you have somebody who's performing better than another player, I think you keep them playing. So it really is case by case. Like if Wynton McManis comes back, it wouldn't matter how well anybody was playing in his position. He's going to take his position back. But, for example, if you have, a cornerback who gets hurt and then somebody comes on, then I would not trade out, that cornerback or even quarterback. If you brought somebody off the bench and suddenly they were really good, I would stay with the hot hand. I think you have to roll with who is winning in professional football.
I think the best players have to play. I think when it gets tough, and we're not really talking about that situation here, but when it gets tough, like suppose like in Chad Kelly's absence, like suppose Arbuckle were just on fire and the team was 5-0 and he's playing as well as he's ever played. Like those are tough situations because obviously you're going to play Chad Kelly when he's healthy. He's your guy. He's the guy that you're paying all this money to. But that's when I think it does get tough. But the Argos aren't in a situation like that. But it is still sad to see some of these moves made. Some of the players that were released are players that fans have grown to love over the last few weeks, and it's tough to say goodbye in some of these cases. I also think it's interesting when you look at the transactions from this week. you can kind of see what's coming. So we'll go through them chronologically. Like the first transaction the Argos made was Estevan Acibodadze was brought back. So he was the Argos 4th round pick from this year, University of Windsor. He was a guy I really liked, and I sort of saw him as like a special teams, big special teams upside potentially. I didn't really necessarily see him as getting onto the field as a starting corner or anything, but I did think there was upside special teams wise. He was let go, and well, he got put on like quote unquote suspended list because this is what happens when a player is going back to school, and I believe that was the plan here, where he'd be going back to Windsor. But now how this works with him being called back onto the roster, it's so odd. So I was looking through how this works, talking to some of my friends at 3 Down Nation, and because JC Abbott's great with this stuff, John Hodge great with this stuff, and what I believe is the case is he can go back and play for the University of Windsor as long as he doesn't play in a game for the Argonauts. As soon as he dresses, he loses that right, and so. And he basically has until late August, to remove himself from the roster and declare that he's going back to school. It's such an odd system. I like it. I think it's great for the player, for the student. But that's the situation here. And I don't foresee him ending up on the dress roster. I see him as a guy that, unless Jonathan Edouard goes down with an injury, I don't see this as being something that's going to happen. But in this transaction, I thought, well, somebody on special teams is probably going to have to get released if this is the signing they're making. And that happened today with the release of Daniel Kwamou, linebacker, 5th round pick from 2022. And why I think it's a real shame with Kwamou, because he looks so good positionally in preseason, and he hasn't had a chance to show that. He hasn't had regular season snaps defensively. He's played special teams, and this is a unit that has been beat up a lot over the last few weeks. And so, Kwamou was released, and I sort of see that as the second part of this transaction with bringing Acibodadze in. But it's sad to lose Kwamou, a guy that's been around for a few years, a guy that's been through those, through the Grey Cups, and has been a real contributor on special teams. And to see him playing so well in the preseason, I hate to see him be released, but I think he's a guy that will find a landing spot pretty quickly. The other moves, Elias Bell was released. He's a defensive tackle that had played next to Derek Parrish at Houston for a couple of years. He only dressed for one game against Saskatchewan. It wasn't really that impactful. He looked okay, but he's a guy that was brought in as a run stopper, and that seemed to be the one weak area of that game for him. So I guess that's why he was released. And then the one that everyone's been talking about today, JB, the release of running back Kevin Brown. So what is it that upsets people so much about all of the running back movement that there's been so far? Why are people upset about the release of Kevin Brown? And maybe, how might they look at this logically instead?
I don't know why anybody would be surprised or upset. He was cut coming out of camp. He was brought back in an emergency scenario. He's not, he's not really that good. So it's not surprising as McMahon gets healthy, that they're not going to carry Kevin Brown as a third running back. He's certainly not going to be better than another player at another position. So I mean, it makes sense to me. I think the team definitely is looking to turn some roster over. Not necessarily cutting starters, but even the messages are sent when guys who are part of the team are released. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some desire for guys on the team to see surprising people cut. In a way to kind of shake up the energy of the room that more is expected. So it makes sense that Kevin Brown would be one of the people to be let go.
I think the emergence of Kalen LeBourne has to do with that. I think, maybe people were surprised that Brown was cut over LeBourne, but LeBourne flashed speed. And I think the most important thing is pass protection. Like, that is something that all of these backs have done well, except for Kevin Brown. Like, that has been he's not as smooth a receiver out of the backfield either as the other three guys too. I guess that you could say as well. But, Kevin Brown averaging 2.1 yards a carry. He wasn't on a roster a couple of weeks ago, like you said, and so it shouldn't really be a surprise. I do think Kevin Brown is a good runner. I think he's great with the ball in his hands, but I do think there's just so much more to the CFL running back job that you better be a great pass protector, you better be a great receiver, and Mayan Williams, Deonta McMahon, and Kalen LeBourne are those things. And so when they saw what LeBourne could do last week, they're like, well, that's, I guess it's an easier decision to make in letting Brown go and keeping LeBourne. And we'll see what happens when Mayan Williams comes back. Is that the end of Kalen LeBourne? Does he go on the, back to the practice roster? That's what I would assume would happen. But you never know. This is not a team that carries a lot of running backs. So that's why this move happened. And I would expect, we'll get into the injury report and everything else, but I think this is going to be McMahon and LeBourne in the backfield this week, which is a pretty exciting duo. That's a duo with a ton of speed and shiftiness, guys that can hit home runs from just about anywhere. So there's that to look forward to. And then the last transaction, the Argos released Donald Rutledge. This was the only move that really surprised me. Rutledge played in the first game against Montreal at the Sam linebacker spot. I thought he looked okay. It wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. He ended up suffering an injury. I believe it was a concussion, and he had his job taken. Kenneth George Jr. came in to play the Sam linebacker spot after that. He played for a couple games and had that horrific injury. And I didn't think Kenneth George looked better than Rutledge, though. He was fine also. I think Rutledge looked slightly better. And then after that, Jarrett Martin came in. He's been the Sam backer for the last couple games. And again, nothing wrong with how Martin's playing, but I wouldn't say that Martin's had a level of play where you're like, well, that's solved all our problems. We don't need to think about Sam linebacker ever again. And so it just surprised me a little bit in that sense. But I don't like. Why do you think you might see a player like Donald Rutledge, who looked, really okay in that one appearance? Why do you let a guy like that go at this point?
Good question. Could be any number of things. Of course, we never know what's happening behind the scenes. Right. Whether players are not progressing, or players feel frustrated that they are behind the depth chart, and feel like they could be providing more than those that are playing. It could be just as simple as they're not very happy with the secondary, and somebody had to be cut to send a message, and he pulled the short straw.
It's a lot of transactions for a team that hasn't had a ton of transactions except at the running back position this year. There's been a lot this week, but as we said, like, the good side of this and the good side of these releases is that you're starting to get guys back, and those are some names we'll talk about when we go through the injury report for this week, coming up a little bit later on the show. Still talking about injuries though, JB. Let's talk about, I guess, the Chad Kelly situation, but also a little bit Wynton McManis, maybe a little bit Deonta McMahon, maybe a little bit Jack Cassar too. The question is, how soon is too soon to bring back a player from injury? And do teams need to adjust that timeline if things are getting dire? And so let's look at Chad Kelly. Let's look at McManis. I assume McManis is going to play this week just based on what I've seen in the injury report, what I've seen at practice. Depth charts come out tomorrow. If you're listening to this, we're recording Tuesday night. Depth charts will come out Wednesday, and we'll have some of these questions answered. But I assume those guys are going to play. I assume Chad Kelly is not going to play. Actually, he's already been ruled out. If the Argos were 0-5 and everyone else in the division had a winning record, would Chad Kelly be back this week? Would Wynton McManis maybe have been back a couple weeks ago? How do you balance this, JB, as a coach looking at significant players who are injured and when you bring them back?
Well, yeah, I mean, they definitely, I don't know. Are they better to be more conservative in their initial prediction for how long they're going to be out? Um, Clearly guys are much more hurt than they initially think because their timelines have really been off. I don't think you bring guys back. I don't think there's any advantage. It's not. It depends on the position. It depends on the injury. But most of the time, if you bring a guy back too early, all that happens is they get um, worse. Because they have to compensate for the injury that they have, and then they hurt something else. So I don't think there's any advantage to bringing guys back. So I think it's important for people to be patient because if a guy's not 100%, all you're doing is bringing them back for half a game and then they're out and then they're out for 4 more weeks. So I think you're much better. You could argue that they probably would have been better to put Wynton on the 6th game. And, I probably lean that way, from the get go of the season when guys are hurt to really wait until they're 100% until you put them back in, because most of the time it just ends up being not very useful to you.
It's an interesting thing. I want to get back to the 6th game in just a second, but like the devil's advocate would sort of say, but in a few weeks' time, it may not matter anymore. Like there's a situation where you might say to yourself, and I don't think the Argos have been lucky here because no one's run away with the division. Even Montreal has come back to earth and are technically in 2nd place now after their hot start. And so they do have that luxury of time now. But in this hypothetical situation, if everyone else were running away with the division, like a few more weeks might be too late. And I would say also players are always hurt. You're always hurt. Like nobody on the Argos is healthy right now. Like even the players that are healthy and not in the injury report, they're hurting. They're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. That's just the nature of being a pro football player. But
that boils down to hurt or injured, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't play hurt, but you can't play people who are injured.
But we see it all the time too, like where guys will continue to play through injuries, guys that have pretty bad wrist sprains. We've seen guys with ankle sprains, broken ribs. We've seen guys play, just suit up with a flak jacket and figure it out. Like guys do play with serious injuries, but weighing that from a team perspective, I think is easier when you know there's still time. And I think like that's the situation the Argos are in now, where fortunately for them, no one has run away with the division. You can take, if you need those extra couple weeks, then yeah, you can take them to make sure Chad Kelly is fully healthy. As I said, I think Wynton McManis is going to play this week. I think McMahon is going to play this week. Those injuries, could you give them could they have waited another week? Maybe. But I just think it's a very tough. I think this is one of the hardest decisions to make in pro football is when to bring back a star player from injury. And I included Jack Cassar in that list initially too, because while he's not necessarily the star that Chad Kelly, Wynton McManis are, I would say his absence has contributed to at least one loss and possibly two. You can look at the Saskatchewan game. You can look at the Hamilton game as, if Jack Cassar's out there, those games maybe end very differently. But with all these guys, it looks like Jack Cassar is not going to play this week. He's been listed as out. McManis, McMahon are listed as available. We'll see if the Argos actually do put them out there and if they are, and they're healthy, obviously this is a huge pickup for the team. But you can imagine how good it will feel for the team too when Chad Kelly is eventually able to play. You're just hoping it's sooner rather than later. And then getting back to the 6-game thing, now this being the 6th game that Chad Kelly will miss, let's revisit this one last time, JB. Knowing what we know now, should he have been on the 6th game from the beginning, or was this still the right thing to do the way it's played out?
It was difficult to know in terms of what his status was. Did he have a setback? It certainly seems like he's had a setback, and that's tough to predict. I would have to say that being able to practice with the team, be able to work with your receivers is probably worth it. It might have been easier from a PR point of view to simply have him out of mind and out of sight until, after 6 games. And then there was no kind of weekly, desire to get them back. So it probably would have been easier for them from a PR perspective. But I just have to assume that they thought they had a decent chance of getting him for, week 3 or week 4. And he just did not progress as well as they hoped. I really feel that has to be the case.
I think as long as he's getting his rehab work in, then I do think there is great value in having him practice with the team, even if it's just limited, because instead of, when you're on the 6th game, you're not out there, right? Like you are not practicing with the guys. And so all of the exchanges that he's had with the running backs, the throws that he's made, the chemistry with the receivers, the chemistry with the offensive line, like all of that stuff, even though he's not out there as a full participant in practice, those things matter. And coming back, like you can imagine coming back to a scenario, let's say he's able to play next week in Winnipeg, and let's say he wasn't able to practice for the first time until what I guess would be Sunday. That would be tough. The last time you were on a football field with guys around you was in the East Final, and you got to go all the way till like 4 or 5 days before a game to get back out there. So I see it from that point of view. Like he's going to be far more ready to return than had he just been on the rehab field this entire time. So that's the counter maybe to that, and that's maybe what makes this worthwhile. And then a point that you brought up a couple of weeks ago was, what would that have achieved having him on the 6th game, other than what you mentioned, like the saving everyone asking every week, is Chad Kelly coming back this week? Is Chad Kelly coming back this week? I'm sure they're sick of it. But aside from that, I don't know that the money was, there's like we said, where are you going to spend? Who else are you bringing in? What was going to happen with that? So I'm not sure there's really another answer. So I don't think there's any harm in what happened here with this. You would like Chad Kelly to have come back earlier, but I don't think this has played out poorly for the Argos by having him at practice for these first 6 weeks. Let's get into pick 6, JB. This is a question that we do every week, and this is sponsored by Something in the Water Brewing. If you win pick 6, what it means is you've submitted a question to us. We picked your question. We answer your question on the pod, and you win a 6-pack of beer courtesy of Something in the Water Brewing. Our winner this week with a great question is David Tyndall. David, you have won that 6-pack of beer from Something in the Water Brewing. David's question was as follows. Defensive tackling has looked like a challenge at times. What can we do to prevent yards after touches against Montreal? And so essentially, JB, I'm going to turn this over to you as the defensive guy. What do you do? What do you do to limit yards after catch, yards per carry, yards beyond the line of scrimmage? How do you avoid missed tackles?
Usually, especially at the professional level, like missed tackles are not a technique issue and they're not a courage or fear of contact issue. But it is players not diagnosing plays quickly enough and taking poor angles or not being able to take the correct angle to the contact intersection point because they're getting there late. And if you get there late, you're not able to get a clean shot or you're not able to really line up the person you're trying to tackle. How do you improve it? I mean, to be honest, some of it is an attitude. There are teams that are more physically intimidating. I think if you look at Hamilton, there's a noticeable difference in the violence that their defensive players are bringing across the board than Toronto.
I think that's only towards Toronto.
It's true. But the secondary in Toronto does not seem overly physical, to be honest. I think that is a dynamic that not every defensive back is necessarily going to be Chris Edwards. I think McFadden is the most physical, and I'd love to see more of that from everybody. It's hard to say. Look, it is a combination of things. I mean, some of it is being in the right position. Some of it is taking the correct angle. Some of it is a desire to inflict violence. And, you watch Cam Judge and you watch Wynton hit, and they are bringing that with them. There is a mindset. So I can't completely put it to guys being in the wrong position. It's hard to figure out. I mean, as a defensive coordinator, I'm sure that they would love for the team to have more energy. We used to talk years ago how Chris Edwards changed the whole dynamic when he came back, because it just kind of lit a fire under other guys. And I think Wynton coming back will change that. Honestly, I would be surprised if the yard after catch did not drop significantly this game.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think the way that Hamilton played against the Argos, that sort of style that you're talking about, where it just feels like every tackle isn't just a tackle, it's a hit. Like, to me, that's what playoff football looks like, where it's so hard to run in playoff football because guys are throwing longevity concerns out the window, and they are doing whatever it takes to stop you in your tracks. And Hamilton hates Toronto so much because they have to sit there and be reminded week after week how long it's been since winning the Grey Cup, while Toronto seems to hold up the Grey Cup every year, and they just seem to take every ounce of that frustration out on the Argos a couple of weeks ago. You can't play. I don't think you can play a whole season like that, or most teams can't play a whole season like that without suffering injuries. It's just such a volatile way to play football. But you do see it come playoff time, where you've only got a couple playoff games and you're in the Grey Cup, and people will. It's like in hockey, where you see guys like getting shots through. Guys are blocking pucks in the playoffs a way that they don't necessarily in the regular season. They're willing to take a puck to the face in a playoff game more so than you might in game number 24 of the regular season or whatever it is.
It's an intensity that definitely is a part of it. There is a kind of a holistic aspect to it that I'm sure the defensive coordinator and the defensive coaches are frustrated by, but it also goes hand in hand with being in the right position. So it's not as easy to fix as you might hope.
Let's get into the game preview, JB. This could be a big game for the Argonauts if they're able to pull this one out. They're huge underdogs in this one. The standings sit as follows. You got Hamilton and Montreal both tied with a record of 3-2, which is still amazing to me. Like, after the first 3 weeks of the season, I thought Montreal was going to run away with this thing. I figured at some point everyone would catch up to their skill level, but I thought they'd be so far gone by that point that it wouldn't matter. So much of their team going back together, they just hit the ground running, but they've suffered setbacks. Like, Toronto fans know what it's like to play without your starting quarterback. Montreal has just experienced that for 2 games. The interesting stat, JB, like, this season in the CFL, no different from any other season, teams just don't win without their starting quarterback. 14 games teams have played without their starting QB. They are 4-10 in those games, and 2 of those wins came against other backup quarterbacks. So really only twice in 14 games has a backup quarterback beat a starting quarterback. It is very tough. And so Montreal, because of losing Davis Alexander, has come back to earth. I expect him to be back this week. Toronto sits in third at 1-4, and then Ottawa at 1-5 is in fourth. Toronto is lucky. Nobody has run away. If they can somehow upset Montreal here, they're a game out of first place, which is an unbelievable position to find yourself in when you've started the season 1-4, and with everyone sort of feeling their whole world is falling apart here. This is a huge game for Toronto in that sense, and for Montreal, I think it's a very big game because you were 3-0. And now you're looking at going 3-3, having lost the 3rd straight game. The team is in a tailspin at that point. It's anyone's guess as to how that all worked out. So I think this is a massive game for both teams. Weather might be a factor. Weather's been great in Montreal all summer long. Just checking the radar before we went to record, JB, it looks like thunderstorms are imminent. It looks like there is going to be a ton of rain for the game. It looks like we're going to have inches of rain and potentially thunderstorms, potentially delays. Is that something that you see favoring the Argos or the Alouettes if this gets into a pretty messy looking game?
I guess the Argos. I think it would help them a little bit. I don't think it particularly helps Toronto. Toronto doesn't really have a run game, which you might use in that kind of weather. Montreal is not particularly effective at running the ball either. Maybe it makes it a little harder for Toronto's offensive line if they can really get off the ball quick in that bad weather. But I think in the end a rock fight is perfectly fine for Toronto. So bad weather, I think, is okay for Toronto.
Yeah, I think bad weather is a neutralizer. Like that, I've always said, like coaching, when I'm the better team, I hate bad weather. When I've got the better team, I want perfect football weather. I don't want any wind. I don't want any rain or snow or ice or fog. Nothing that is going to, because I think we'll win most of the time when we have the better squad. Weather messes all that up. You have weird plays, things that just happen, and the ball squirts out here, lands in someone's arms, they run it back for a touchdown. Stuff like that happens all the time in bad weather. And so I think the Argos here, as huge underdogs, I don't think bad weather is a bad thing at all. I think if anything, maybe it will be an equalizer. Maybe you can pull out a defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown on a muff punt or something like that, and suddenly the Argos are out front, and we know how much better they are playing with a lead than when they're behind. So that's something that I don't think Montreal is looking forward to getting a lot of rain for this game. Let's get into this injury report, JB. We talked a lot about injuries on this pod. It has been the theme of the season, but it looks like there is finally going to be some relief. We'll do Montreal's injuries first because it's far more simple. They've been missing their quarterback, Davis Alexander. It looks like he's coming back. He's practiced full all week this week. He's expected to be announced as the starting quarterback. They're getting Nick Callender back, offensive lineman who's been out with the foot injury. Earlier in the week, he was able to practice full. He should play. Austin Mack has been full all week with the hamstring injury that he's had. Tyson Philpott's their only question mark, and I think this would be pretty big. So he's got a knee injury, did not practice at all on Sunday, went full Monday, but then was limited today. So we'll see. I think he's been listed as questionable right now, and so we'll have to wait to find out if he's going to be able to go or not on Thursday. For the Argos.
Yeah, that would be huge if he didn't.
Oh, yeah. Philpott's a difference maker. And if he's out, like getting Mack back neutralizes that a bit. But Mack hasn't been the same. Like he hasn't looked like the Austin Mack that was rewriting records and stuff like that a couple of years ago. So I think they would definitely miss Tyson Philpott. For the Argos, Cassar has been ruled out. Ryan Hunter has been ruled out. We'll talk about that in a second. And Chad Kelly has been ruled out. Mayan Williams has been ruled out. Let's talk about those four guys first. So Cassar's got the adductor injury. I thought he might be able to come back this week, but he's still being held out. Those are such tough injuries. Like those are really easy injuries to re-aggravate. And so you do not want to err on that and bring him back too soon. He's so valuable. We talked about that earlier in the show. They need to get him back as soon as possible, but it is too soon for him. The Ryan Hunter injury, this was a surprise. In the bye week, looks like Ryan Hunter suffered a shoulder injury. He was at practice yesterday wearing a sling. Sling is not a good sign for offensive linemen. I don't know the nature of the shoulder injury. I don't know, what part of the shoulder we're talking about. But if you're an offensive lineman in a sling, we're usually talking about a couple of weeks at least, to even potentially being like season ending if there's like a surgery involved or something like that. So it really could be anything until we find out more information as to the extent of this injury, what kind of shoulder injury it is, whether it's from lifting or whatever. And that will obviously be a problem for the Argos. But JB, the one thing that I think may open a window for them here is I think Aneem Dankwa is going to start at right tackle in place of Ryan Hunter. He was getting first team reps today at the right tackle position. I think Aneem Dankwa is going to be a starter in the CFL for a long time. I think he's not necessarily someone that would have been on all our listeners' radar, but it is my guess, and I'm gonna kind of make a bet here. Barring injury, I am going to suggest that Anim Dankwa is not going to lose that starting right tackle spot for the rest of the season. Unless there's an injury, I think Anim Dankwa is your starting right tackle going forward. I think he's a really good player. And Ryan Hunter being out, with even if it's for a couple weeks, I think Dankwa is going to play well enough where when Ryan Hunter comes back, they're going to either look to move him back to left tackle where he was last year, or maybe move him back inside to guard where he started his Argos career. So I'm not necessarily worried about the right tackle position because of Dankwa, but you don't get better by losing a guy like Ryan Hunter. Obviously, that's like, for a team that was so excited to get some of these guys back, seeing that Ryan Hunter news was just gutting. But what are your thoughts on Ryan Hunter?
No, I mean, obviously, like he has not played as well this year as he did, in the previous years. However, like you say, at no point are you a better team without Ryan Hunter than you are with.
Right.
A sling is worrying, the same way a guy wearing a boot would be worrying, because means the injury is not able to be. You're not able to sort of rehab without help. So that usually means a more severe injury. So yeah, it is concerning. I think they're going to be tested against Montreal's defensive line without being able to go with their best five.
And Chad Kelly out, which we've already documented in this show. Mayan Williams, the last one. I had wondered coming into this week, I kind of thought maybe this would be when you see Mayan Williams back out practicing, but the fact that he didn't practice at all this week, that's really concerning. He took such a shot to the face from that Ottawa knee. I don't know a timeline on this. Like, it makes me wonder if we've got structural issues. Like, is this an orbital bone? Is this, hopefully not. This is not like eye. We had heard post game when the injury occurred that his eye was so swollen that he couldn't see out of it. But yeah, hopefully for Mayan Williams, this is, even just like aside from football, hopefully he's doing all right and can get back to normal really soon, and eventually to get back out on the football field to where he'd like to be. But that's tough to see. I had really hoped we'd see Mayan Williams in the backfield, but that provides the opportunity for the speed of Kalen LeBourne and Deonta McMahon. What do you think of having those two guys in the backfield, JB? Instead of thunder lightning, it's just lots of lightning, which may be metaphoric for what we're literally seeing at Percival Molson Stadium on Thursday.
It's interesting. LeBourne, we'll see if is this something or is this nothing. We'll be able to make a call, I think, after this game. McMahon back is very useful. He looked fantastic in the times that we saw him this year. Look, I think especially catching the ball in the backfield, he's going to slow down that pass rush. Those guys are going to be able to, whether it be through the screen game or quick passes out, they're going to be able to punish a team pinning their ears back and trying to get the quarterback. So I think that will help. And we'll get more sense of whether the offensive line can make some lanes. But I think passing out of the backfield will be a real weapon this week, which will be useful for them.
Speaking of passing out of the backfield, that's something that I might talk about on our next segment, OCDC. For OCDC, I'll be handling the offense. JB will be handling the defense for both teams. We'll start with the Montreal Alouettes. I'll go first, JB. Here is my offensive plan for the Montreal Alouettes. First of all, I'm assuming that Davis Alexander is going to be the starting quarterback. I look at that last game, and I rewatched this during the bye, the Montreal-Toronto first week of the season game. All the problems Toronto had with Montreal seemed to stem from Alexander being able to get out of the backfield. It affected the run defense. It affected deep plays downfield, big plays downfield, and Alexander was also able to scramble for first downs, like at such inopportune times where it just felt like Toronto was just about to get the ball back. Maybe they could change the direction of this game, and then Alexander would slip through two Argos defenders and run for a first down. So I think Toronto's plan is probably going to be, and I know I'm doing Montreal's offense, but I'm going to start with Toronto's defense just for a second, JB. I'm stealing some of your stuff here. I think Toronto is going to be hell-bent on keeping Alexander in the pocket. And so I don't think you're necessarily going to get a huge pocket collapse, like guys going right after Alexander. I think they're just going to try and force him to throw from within the pocket. And so to me, I'm going to try and take advantage of that as Montreal, because I know now I have time. And if I've got time in the pocket, guys aren't collapsing quickly on you. Now we've got time to do some stuff that is very hard to cover. And I think we can challenge those Toronto DBs. So double moves, I think, are a big thing. Longer developing routes, like long over routes from deep from left to right, right to left, deep digs as well, deep comeback routes, like all this stuff, those are really hard to cover. And anything that involves players running through multiple zones really challenges the communication of a secondary. And on the road, that's extremely difficult. So that's the stuff that I want to see. And then in terms of the running game, I think you want running back draws in there. Get Toronto flying back in pass coverage, knowing they're going to be in coverage for a long time, and suddenly it's a running back on a draw play. And then when Alexander can find those moments to escape the pocket, to challenge, contain, when defenses get frustrated and decide to take a risk, now you do escape the pocket and you make Toronto pay with that. So that is my offensive plan for the Montreal Alouettes. What is your defensive plan for les Alouettes de Montréal, JB?
Toronto is better at passing than they were in the first week. Arbuckle has certainly come along. Toronto is not very good at running. I think obviously they'll be a little better this week, but defensively, you definitely want to try and get after the quarterback. Arbuckle is Toronto's only chance to win the game. Arbuckle has been good at hitting some deep passes. So I think that defensively, you just want to bring that heat and not let those deep developing routes occur. So I think Montreal will be very aggressive, that they will, especially at the beginning, they will bring a lot of different looks to get after Kelly. Kelly's not that mobile a quarterback, so you don't have to worry about setting edges. You can really crash down. You can really bring heat up the middle. And, you could focus on the passing on the backfield, but if I'm Montreal, I'm not worried about that. That's not going to be something that's going to cause you that much problems. I think you want to have that, a single high safety and bring heat.
Yeah, and turning this over to the good guys, like what you're talking about with Arbuckle and the lack of mobility there, I'm going to try and get the most I can out of Arbuckle as a runner. And I know that sounds like a terrible start to a game plan. It's what Arbuckle does worst, I guess. He's got a lot of strengths, a lot of skills, but speed isn't one of them at the moment, at this stage in his career. And the problem is every team knows that, and they're not playing fair football because of that. It's what has made the offensive line's job so hard, is that defensive ends are no longer that worried about contain. And so my offensive plan starts with Nick Arbuckle getting outside the pocket. I think you want to design plays that actually get Nick on the move, design plays where you've got the running back chipping the DN, the contain man, and allowing Arbuckle to escape. This does a few things. It changes the launch point, and so that puts more pressure on the DBs when the ball is coming from a slightly different trajectory, different angle. That makes it harder to cover. And if Arbuckle can get like 4 or 5 yards, that's fine. Take it. Get those 4 or 5 yards. I think that has to be part of the game plan. I know that's not a whole game plan, but I think it starts there. He's got to run the ball himself too on some of those play fakes where nobody goes with his fake. We see it all the time. He'll run a play fake to whichever running back and everyone collapses on the back. Nobody respects his fake after he hands the ball off. So I think he's got to keep it, and he's got to run the football a bunch in this game just to keep the ends doing their job. And now we're playing fair football. Now you can do some of your regular stuff. It's just too hard to when the defensive ends aren't playing contain. I think you also have to play safe. You can't turn the ball over, no turnovers. So you can run like the Cody Fajardo Montreal offense from a year ago, run hooks, run quicks, receiver screens, jets. This is where the yards have to come from. I'm okay if it's 2 first downs and a punt. But you've got to get those 2 first downs. And every so often, one of those plays is going to break. You've got athletes. Get the ball to Kevin Mattal, 5-yard hooks, and see if he can make something happen after the play. You've got a lot of playmakers, Coxie and Daniels, and those running backs that I think are really dynamic. Get them outside too on those swing passes. Nothing deep downfield, nothing too risky. The occasional ball for Coxie I'm fine with. That's his place. But everything else just has to be safe and smart. Lastly, be prepared to abandon the run if it's not working. And I think you'll know early on. It didn't work at all in the first week of the season. I don't know if it's going to work in this game either. If it's not there, that's okay. Find your extensions. Find your running extensions. And that means getting the running backs the ball out of the backfield, those quick screens, like all the stuff that kind of that makes up for the running game. Get that stuff going instead of running into a brick wall and starting 2nd and 11 every single drive. All right, JB, what is your Toronto defensive plan to stop Davis Alexander and these Montreal Alouettes?
Yeah, I mean, Alexander is playing really well. I think you have to try and force Montreal to run the ball. They are better at passing than they are at running the ball. They're not a particularly dangerous offensive team. So it's not really like, especially if McManis is back, I think you feel fine matching up with them. This is not a team, especially if Philpott is not able to go. This is not a team that you need to fear particularly in terms of offense. So, defensively, they don't need to do anything particularly exotic or dramatic. But I would still like Montreal to try and run the ball. They're not as good as that. I'm okay if they get, rushing yards. Mm-hmm. You're just trying to have to keep the Montreal quarterback from getting into a rhythm and keep everything in front of you. Montreal loves to kick field goals, and I would allow them to kick field goals. They like to do it. They're good at it, and try and keep this to a manageable game, because one of the things that's really killed Toronto is teams, basically scoring touchdowns on 2 plays or 3 plays. That drives are incredibly short, and the defense has to go right back on the field because, the other team scored on the second play of the drive. So they need to get rid of that. They have to cut down on that, which will be will certainly be my one thing. So more deep umbrella zone coverage is what I'm looking to do here, and see if you can force Montreal at the very least to have to put together long drives to score touchdowns instead of these really quick turnarounds, which have really been hurting them. That they're unable to give the defense a decent blow on the sideline because on the 3rd play of the drive, the guy goes for 60 yards.
Yeah, that was the whole Saskatchewan game, basically.
Yeah, terrible.
And you're doing all the transitions for me, JB, today. That puts us right into one thing. And my one thing this week is going to be explosive plays, but specifically, I want it from Toronto's running backs. I've talked about how they are speed merchants who can score from anywhere on the field. I want to see a little bit of that. So my one thing is I want a 20-plus yard play from one of the Toronto running backs. It can be a catch to the backfield. It can be a run. I want an explosive play, 20 yards or more from one of those guys. Toronto has not had a 20-yard run this season. They had a 19-yard run from Mayan Williams, and that was as close as they've gotten. I don't think anything else is even quite close to that. So I want a 20-yard run or a 20-yard reception from a running back. What is your one thing this week, JB?
Similar, but on the flip side, and Toronto is last in allowing opponents to have passing plays over 30 yards, and that has to come to an end. So no passing plays over 30 yards.
And I would say if both our one things sometimes hit and the Argos lose anyway, and sometimes they miss and the Argos win, I feel confident if both of our one things hit this week, I think the Argos are winning the football game. I think those are really big keys to this game on both sides of the football. All right, let's get into Put Me Down for 20. JB, we are both still positive. You are not necessarily rolling in fleeces, but you're spending confidently. You almost were, if not for your Edmonton Elks not putting up enough points. JB set his own over and under lines last week for some fancy money. Calgary, Saskatchewan hit the under for plus 215. You'd set that down to 45.5. BC, Edmonton, you set all the way up to 59.5 for plus 240, but Edmonton could not get the job done. You're still up on the week, though. You are now up to 221.5 golden fleeces. I had one loss and one holdover. I had Argos to win the Grey Cup at plus 900. And I had Drew Brown with 350 passing yards. I don't know what he ended up with. I didn't even look, but I just assume he did not hit that because it was not looking good for him in the Ottawa offense. I don't know why I made that bet. So I'm sitting at 210 golden fleeces. A reminder, folks, do not take any of our bets seriously. We certainly don't. Don't bet any of your hard-earned money on stuff we say, and never bet, if you're going to, never bet anything more than the cost that you're happy to lose as a price of entertainment. All right, JB, let's get to it. What are your bets for this week? Where are you putting your golden fleeces?
For my Toronto bet, I'm gonna put my faith in Arbuckle. He's played really well. He's improved every game. I've been really impressed with, not just statistically how much he's improved, but how much more in control he feels out there. So I'm gonna go Arbuckle 300 yards. At plus 115 for 10.
Just on that note, JB, because I think it's important to mention, we did mention that post-game, but if you didn't hear the post-game reaction pod from, I guess, 2 weeks ago, I think people are missing that. Like, I still hear a lot of complaint about Arbuckle's play, and Arbuckle being the reason Toronto has lost games. He really isn't. Like, he has, as you said, like, he's gotten better every single week. He's gotten smarter with his decision making. He's made plays. He's shown some real development in terms of his chemistry with different receivers, especially Kevin Mittal. So yeah, I think there's way more Arbuckle criticism out there than there should be, and I think that's probably more reflective of what people saw in the first two games of the season. But this might be a tough one, especially if it starts raining. We'll see how that.
Well, this is it.
We'll see how that goes.
I'll just roll the dice that maybe the storm doesn't come.
And
then my other bet is the over. So over 55.5. BC and Saskatchewan. I think that's going to be the book also believes it's going to be a shootout because there wasn't much. I had to go pretty high up the ladder to get any juice, but so be it at plus 124.
On the other side, I'm taking two swings for the fences, JB style. So first, in the Toronto game, I'm putting 10 golden fleeces on the Toronto defense to score a touchdown at plus 650. This defense is due it's not that they haven't had a touchdown all year. They've had with Sluka. I think Benji Franklin is due, and I'm waiting for a pick six here, but also with potential weather issues, maybe that ball ends up on the ground and someone's able to pick it up and score. I thought that was too good a price to pass up on. And then my other bet, 10 golden fleeces on the Calgary Stampeders to win in Winnipeg at plus 155. I don't know if I actually think they're going to win the game. I just think they're a really good football team. They're right now sitting on top of the West at 4-1. They've looked great in most of those games. And, they've already done it once, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them do it again. And if you're talking about plus 155, I just think that's too good a price not to put down 10 golden fleeces, especially when they're imaginary. And let's finish up with Challenge Flag. JB, you beat me again last week. You are now up 4-2. It wasn't really fair because I couldn't have done anything right last week. You were 3-0. You had all three games picked correctly, so it didn't matter what I challenged. I'm waiting for you to have an 0-3 week where it doesn't matter what I challenge. That would be a win for me either way. So yeah, you're on fire. You're winning 4-2 in Challenge Flag, and you're 14-9 overall on the season. Let's see how you do this week. Toronto at Montreal, that opens things up on Thursday night. Are you going with the huge underdog Argonauts, or are you taking the heavy favorite Montreal Alouettes?
Well, I'll tell you, I would say there are a lot of reasons to take Montreal. However, if Wynton McManis is back, then my faith is restored, and I am going to take the Toronto Argonauts.
Love it. That is a risky play. Let's go Calgary at Winnipeg. Where are you going with this one?
Well, obviously I love Calgary. I thought that they were really good. I thought that like statistically they looked fantastic. They smacked around Saskatchewan. However, Winnipeg at home, I think Winnipeg gets that done.
All right. And then Saskatchewan at BC.
This is interesting too, but I feel like Saskatchewan's a bit of a paper tiger, and I'm going to take BC.
Yeah. These are some fun games this week. Actually, I really like this lineup.
It's a really nice It's a really nice. There's not a dog in the bunch, and that's not unrelated to who's on the bye.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
I wonder why these games are so good. It's because the two worst teams are playing.
Hamilton at Hamilton at Ottawa to wrap up. Where are you going with this one?
Well, I'm not taking the Red Blacks.
Yeah, I should already have written down Hamilton.
I'm certainly not watching that game either. God knows it's those games in black and white in Ottawa with their candlelit power stadium lights.
Yeah, I don't know. Those games never look good on TV. I don't know why in that stadium. It just terrible. I don't think it's the lighting. I think it's the turf. I think for some reason it looks like reflective, and you get this like black and white looking field. It's very odd. It doesn't look like that in any other stadium.
I mean, an Ottawa win would be ideal.
It'd be very helpful
in terms of keeping the Argos in the mix. So certainly I will be cheering for an Ottawa win, but I will not be picking an Ottawa win.
So I'm going to throw my challenge. Oh, this is tough. I'm going to go with. I'm going to double down on my bet. My Calgary plus 155 on the money line. I'm going to go with them.
You're on the Calgary.
I'm on the Calgary train now. Yeah, no, it's
right.
Stampede was in town. I'm feeling that Calgary spirit. So yeah, I'm going to challenge the Calgary-Winnipeg result. That'll be where my challenge flag is thrown, and see if I can get back into this competition, or if you're going to start running away with it. Already up 4-2. It's going to be a good one this week. It always is when Toronto and Montreal get together. There have been so many classics. I was on the Alouettes flight deck earlier today, and we were just talking about some of the games over the last, really it's decades now. Ever since the Alouettes came back into existence, it just feels like there have been so many Toronto-Montreal classics. And is this going to be a DeMonte Coxey show? How is this going to end?
It's true. I thought about going Coxey touchdown. Me too. Because obviously. But I don't want to do that every time they're in Montreal, but for sure. And, I'm excited as I'm, making my way back to the East Coast, and my father, longtime Alouettes fan. So we'll be able to have some head-to-head television watching competition on Thursday.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that would be fun. And give my best to your folks, and I hope your dad's team loses on Thursday night. Yeah. Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. kickoff. You can listen to Mike Hogan and myself on TSN 1050. Our pregame show starts at 7 o'clock, Toronto at the Montreal Alouettes. That will just about do it for us on this pregame walkthrough edition of the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.